My name is Jennifer Chase. 2 months ago, my own brother destroyed everything I ever wrote, and my parents watched it happen. But I'll make sure none of them forget what I became after that day. Where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, because this story starts in Sacramento, but it could happen anywhere. There's something about old furniture that traps emotions in its seams. Our family's living room, still holding onto its 90s plaid couch and the smell of overcooked casseroles, had seen birthday parties, school projects, even one ugly Thanksgiving meltdown, but nothing quite like this. I said no, Eric, I repeated, folding my arms across my chest. You already owe me $3,000, I'm not giving you another cent. Eric scoffed like I'd insulted him. His voice, too loud for the quiet room, bounced off the ceiling fan. You always act like the victim, Jen. Poor little genius with her notebooks and fancy degrees. He was standing by the fireplace, still in his wrinkled work polo, though I doubted he'd clocked a single hour that week. Eric used to be charming when we were younger, silver-tongued, fast-smiling. Lately, that charm had curdled into something meaner, entitled. I'm not your ATM, I snapped. From her recliner, our mom let out a long, theatrical sigh. Don't start this again, Susan mumbled, not even looking up from her knitting. It was always her line. Whether Eric crashed a car or borrowed money he never returned, don't start this again. Our dad didn't speak. He just clicked the remote, flipping channels like this was white noise instead of our actual lives breaking apart. I stood near the bookshelf where I used to keep my old diaries and drafts, tattered journals from high school, my college thesis, printed poems I'd never had the nerve to share. This room had been my childhood cocoon. Now it felt like a trap. Eric stepped closer, arms wide in mock surrender. Come on, Jen, you make good money now. What's a couple more bills to your baby brother? That's not the point, I said. You never pay me back, and every time I say no, you pull this guilt trip. His smile cracked then. You think you're better than us, don't you? That one sentence, the family motto of resentment. Any time I did something right, they'd twist it into arrogance. I'd published a poem last year that got picked up by a journal in New York, and suddenly I was the selfish one, the snob, the distant daughter. You think I like being stuck here again? I shot back. This wasn't the plan, Eric, none of it. My voice caught, but I refused to let it tremble. I wasn't supposed to be living at my parents' house at 33. I came back after the nonprofit I worked for in Seattle downsized. Temporary, I'd told myself. A few months max. Just until I got back on my feet. I didn't count on being dragged back into the same dysfunction I'd worked so hard to escape. Eric turned toward our dad. Say something, he demanded. Dad raised an eyebrow, but his eyes never left the screen. Baseball, Giants versus Dodgers, anything but us. He's just asking for help, Susan said, voice carefully neutral. He's had a hard year. So have I replied. But I'm not selling guilt to pay the bills. Eric's jaw tightened. You always make me the villain. Maybe stop acting like one. Silence settled in, the kind that makes your skin itch. Finally, Eric shook his head and laughed bitterly. You'll regret this, Jen. Maybe, I said, but not today. He stormed out, keys jingling, footsteps echoing down the hall. I waited until the front door slammed. Then I turned to our parents. You're really not going to say anything? Susan's needles clicked steadily. We've been through enough fighting. I'm too old for more drama. Dad flipped the channel again. I stood there, heart pounding, anger curling in my throat like smoke. No one moved. No one cared. And somewhere deep inside me, something small and breakable began to harden. The next morning, something felt off. I don't mean in the mystical, gut instinct sort of way. I mean physically, like walking into a familiar room and bumping into a wall that never used to be there. I was looking for a particular journal. A soft-covered one with a bent corner I'd kept since I was 17. The one with my earliest poems, my first real short story. I was going to reread it, to remember who I used to be before all this family weight pressed me down again. But the journal wasn't in its usual spot. Neither was the blue folder with my MFA thesis, or the stack of spiral notebooks I kept tucked behind the fiction section of my bookshelf, hidden like treasure. I crouched lower, moving books aside. Just dust rings and torn shelf paper stared back at me. My stomach dropped. I checked under the bed in the bottom drawer of my nightstand behind the closet shoe rack. Nothing. Even the plastic bin in the corner, the one labeled Old Writings, was missing. I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by absence. Someone had taken them. "Mom!" I called down the hallway, no answer. "Dad!" Still silence. It was 10:37 a.m. They were probably at Costco or the pharmacy. Retired routines. Predictable schedules, but not Eric. His door was cracked open across the hall. I knocked once, twice, then pushed it open. Empty bed, damp towel on the floor, the faint smell of cologne and old gym socks. That's when I heard it, a voice behind me. "Looking for your scribbles, Eric." I turned sharply. He leaned lazily against the doorframe, holding a mug that definitely wasn't his. One of my favorite ones, turquoise with chipped paint that said, "Poetry is cheaper than therapy." His smirk deepened when he saw my face. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice low. He sipped the coffee. "Recycled M." My mind tried to process the words, but they floated untethered. "What do you mean, recycled?" Eric shrugged. "You never read them anymore. Half of them had food stains. I figured you were done." "I wasn't done," I whispered. "Where are they?" "Gone," he said simply. "I took them down to the center yesterday. Got a few bucks." "Ooh." My voice caught on the edge of something between fury and disbelief. "You sold my writing for scrap paper." "They're not worth anything," he said. "It's not like anyone else was ever gonna read that stuff." I stepped forward. "Those were mine, years of work. You had no right." He smiled. "You left them out, not locked or anything, thought you didn't care." "I live here," I hissed. "This is my room. That doesn't mean you get to steal from me." "Steal," he echoed. "It's not stealing if it's garbage." I could barely breathe. The words hit like bricks, each heavier than the last. My fists curled at my sides. Eric moved past me, casual as ever. "Anyway, no need to thank me. I cleared some space. You're welcome." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I grabbed my keys off the dresser and walked out the front door into the overcast morning, air thick with the scent of fall and something else, something burnt and final. The recycling center wasn't far. 10 minutes down Folsom Boulevard, tucked behind an old hardware store and a chain-link fence covered in rust. By the time I pulled into the cracked asphalt lot, my hands were shaking. Inside, the air smelled like ink, sweat, and dust. Forklifts growled in the distance as paper bales towered like crumpled monuments. At the front counter, 2 workers in neon vests stood behind glass, chatting over takeout. "Excuse me," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I think my brother brought some paper here yesterday, boxes of journals, notebooks. They weren't trash, they were personal writing. I need to get them back." The taller worker raised an eyebrow. "Yesterday? Yes, maybe even late the night before." He glanced at the other guy, who shook his head. "Everything gets shredded same day," the shorter one said, wiping sauce off his mouth. "Nothing's stored." "There must be a way," I insisted. "Maybe the load hasn't been processed yet, or someone saw something." The taller man gave me a half-apologetic shrug. "We process by the ton. We don't log personal items. It's all just paper here." I stared at him. "It wasn't just paper." "Sorry, ma'am," he said gently. "Even if it came in yesterday, it's already gone." Behind him, through a wide industrial window, I could see it. A massive mechanical claw lowering into a pit of shredded sheets, gripping a fresh pile, lifting it toward a conveyor belt that fed the grinding machine. I knew deep in my chest I was watching years of myself being pulverized. I whispered, barely audible, "I wrote my whole life in those pages." The shorter man looked uncomfortable. "Wish we could help." I stood there for another minute, just breathing, just hurting. Then I turned and walked back to my car, rain beginning to tap gently on the windshield as if the sky couldn't hold itself together either. I sat in the driver's seat with my hands still on the wheel, even though the car wasn't running. I couldn't bring myself to move. The engine's silence echoed louder than the machines behind me. Through the foggy windshield, I could still see the plant's exterior, an ugly box of a building with peeling beige paint and a crooked sign that read RC Recycle Solutions. If ever a place looked like the graveyard of dreams, this was it. For a moment, I thought about running back inside, begging one more time. Maybe I'd offer money. Maybe someone, somewhere in that warehouse, remembered seeing a red leather journal or a battered blue folder with coffee stains. Maybe, but the truth had already been spoken. It's already gone. I finally turned the key, the engine coughing to life like it too wanted to resist. The drive home was a blur of red lights and wet roads. Sacramento's trees had started shedding leaves early, and they clung to my windshield in streaks, like nature was trying to cover my eyes from the truth. Inside the house, everything was exactly as I left it. That was the worst part. The hallway was too quiet. The TV still hummed in the living room. My parents had returned and resumed their lives as if the world hadn't just ended in an industrial shredder. Eric was in the kitchen, rummaging through a bag of chips. He looked up when I walked in. "No luck?" he asked, as if we were talking about a lost sock, not 10 years of personal writing. I didn't answer. I walked straight past him. "You're welcome, by the way," he called out. "Pretty sure I saw your ex's letters in one of those journals. Good riddance." I stopped in the hallway, but I didn't turn around. My voice came out steady, even though my whole body was screaming. "You really think this is funny?" Eric's tone was maddeningly casual. "I think you need to let stuff go." I turned slowly, meeting his eyes. "And what have you ever held on to, Eric? A job? A relationship? Anything at all?" He blinked, surprised by the venom in my voice, but I didn't wait for him to answer. I went into my room and closed the door. Then I sat on the floor, not the bed, not the chair, the floor, because I needed to feel grounded, because everything else had already been ripped out from under me. I looked at the shelf again, the hollow space. The bare wood where my words used to live. It wasn't just paper. It wasn't clutter. It was the version of me that never got to speak out loud. The poems I wrote after my first breakup. The story I poured into after that awful miscarriage no one in my family ever asked me about. The letters I wrote to myself on nights I wasn't sure I'd wake up the next morning. Gone. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I did something mechanical. I opened the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out the last notebook I had, one I'd left in my purse last week. It wasn't much. Just a few quotes, a couple of stanzas I was playing with. I flipped to a blank page and stared at it. The silence felt deafening. Eventually, I heard a soft knock on the door. Mom's voice came through. "Jennifer, honey, dinner's ready." I didn't answer, a pause. "You've barely eaten today." Still silence. Another pause, a breath. "Don't punish yourself over something silly." Something silly. I waited until I heard her footsteps retreat before I whispered, "You helped raise a thief." Then the tears came. Not loud sobs. Just silent, stubborn streams down my cheeks while I sat in the dark, alone with what I had left. And in that quiet, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would start over. I didn't know how yet, but I knew this. If they thought destroying my past would silence me, they had no idea who I really was. By noon the next day, I was walking through the sliding glass doors of a strip mall tech store, still wearing the same hoodie from the night before. It felt surreal, shopping for a replacement when what I'd lost couldn't be replaced. Rows of glowing laptops stared back at me from polished tables, pristine and untouched. Sales associates hovered politely, but I waved them off. I didn't want help. I didn't want conversation. I wanted a weapon. That's what it felt like I was doing, arming myself. My hand hesitated over a sleeker model, but something drew me to the one with scratches already on the side. A returned item. Slightly discounted. Flawed, just like me. I bought it with my own card. No family ties, no joint anything. My savings took a hit, but I didn't care. If there was one thing I had left, it was autonomy. Back at the house, I didn't bother with the kitchen or the dining table. I took the box straight to my room, shut the door, and lowered myself to the floor. The click of the cardboard opening was louder than expected. Inside, a fresh power cord, factory foldings, instruction papers I immediately tossed aside. I plugged it in. The screen lit up, bright and expectant. A blank slate. For a moment, I just stared at the blinking cursor. It looked like it was breathing, waiting for me to speak again. I hesitated. What if I couldn't? What if that part of me had been in those pages and now? It was gone. I almost closed the lid. But then I remembered something Maya once said when I was too afraid to submit a poem. If it still haunts you, it's not gone. It's just waiting for you to tell it right. So I began. Not perfectly, not even well. I started with a sentence I hadn't let myself say out loud. My brother destroyed my diaries and my parents watched him do it. The words sat there, raw and bare. Then another came, and another. Soon I was writing like I was bleeding, slow, unstoppable, painful. but clean. I wrote until the sun set and the shadows stretched long across my floor. The only light in the room came from my bedside lamp, casting a warm yellow pool around me and the laptop. Outside, I could hear Eric yelling into his phone on the patio, something about someone ghosting him after he missed Ren again. I ignored it. Inside, I had found a different frequency. It wasn't just poetry this time. It was confession, memory, fire. I wrote about the first time I felt small in this house. About the night I told my parents I wanted to be a writer and my mom said, "That's not a real plan." I wrote about the unspoken weight of being the good child just so they could have something to compare Eric to. And then I wrote something I didn't expect. "You can kill my journals but not my voice. You can burn the paper but not the story because I remember every word." I stopped and read it back. I whispered aloud, "They can't kill my voice." It wasn't a declaration. It was a vow. By midnight, the document was 6 pages long. My eyes ached, but I didn't stop. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about presence. For the first time in days, I felt like I existed again, outside their expectations, outside their judgment. Just me on this floor with words pouring out of a place they hadn't been able to reach. When I finally shut the lid, I was exhausted, but not broken. I climbed into bed without brushing my teeth, without changing, without checking my phone. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought carried me. They tried to erase me, but I'm already rewriting everything. A week later, it felt like nothing had happened. Sacramento's sky stretched in perfect blue above the backyard, cloudless and smug. The scent of sizzling burgers wafted through the air, and someone, probably Dad, had tuned the outdoor speakers to a playlist of 70s hits that made the pool glisten with nostalgia. But I didn't trust any of it. I sat stiffly in a lounge chair near the deep end, knees tucked under me, a tall glass of lemonade sweating beside my new laptop bag. This one I never let out of sight. Not after last time. Dad flipped burgers at the grill, spatula in hand like it was some sacred summer ritual. He didn't say much. He rarely did unless ESPN was involved. Susan moved between guests with a practiced hostess smile, asking neighbors about their grandkids, offering refills and napkins like she hadn't quietly watched my brother destroy my life days ago. And Eric. Eric was already shirtless, cannonballing into the shallow end and laughing too loud. He played the part of carefree little brother perfectly. No debt, no damage, just dimples and charm. I sipped my drink, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It came in the form of my mother's shadow. She approached slowly, setting down her own glass on the patio table beside me. She didn't sit, just stood, arms crossed lightly like she was holding something in. "Jennifer," she said softly, "I need to talk to you." Here it comes. I tilted my sunglasses down just enough to look her in the eye. "I'm listening." She glanced around as if worried someone might overhear. We were in our own backyard. The only thing listening was a plastic flamingo bobbing in the pool. "It's about Eric," she began. He's in deep." I raised an eyebrow. "Define deep." Susan hesitated. Her eyes flicked to my lemonade like she wished hers were stronger. "He owes about $126,000, she finally said. I blinked. "To who, the devil?" "Some of it's credit cards," she murmured. "Some. I think he took out a few loans. He didn't tell us until they started calling." "And now they're calling you," I said flatly. "And we're worried," she added quickly. "He's not built for that kind of pressure." I let that sit in the air between us. Then I said, "You want me to pay it off?" She bit her lip. "You're doing well now, you have savings, a job you can do remotely, your poetry is beautiful." I almost laughed. "You didn't think it was beautiful when you let him destroy it." "That was an accident," she said quickly, too quickly. I shook my head. "No. You didn't stop him. That wasn't silence. That was permission." Susan stiffened. "He's your brother, Jennifer. And I'm your daughter." The words hit harder than I expected. My voice wavered just slightly, enough for her to hear the ache behind it, but she didn't retreat. "Families support each other," she insisted. "You know your father and I don't have that kind of money, and you're the only one who can help." I looked past her, to Dad flipping burgers like he couldn't hear a thing. To Eric, lounging now in a patio chair with a beer and a smile, texting someone and laughing like he had no clue his name was being begged on his behalf. "Let me make this very clear," I said, placing my lemonade down with precision. I will not pay for his chaos. Susan's jaw tightened. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in that quiet disappointment mothers specialize in. The kind designed to cut deeper than rage. He's your family, she repeated. And I'm not his fallout fund, I replied. Then I stood, slowly, calmly. I'm going to my room. If you need help flipping burgers, ask the golden child. She said nothing as I walked away, but the silence behind me crackled with everything she wanted to say and couldn't. I didn't turn around. This time, I let them sit in the discomfort. Let them stew in the consequences of always choosing him. If you've ever felt a moment stretch so thin it threatens to tear, that was the afternoon sunlight right before it happened. The barbecue buzzed around me in fragments. Music, laughter, the hiss of the grill. I had retreated to my lounge chair by the pool, hoping that silence might dull the ache from my mother's request. My laptop sat beside my drink, closed, safe. I could almost hear it humming, waiting for me to pick it up later and finish the poem I'd started that morning. Across the pool, Eric leaned against the patio post, beer in hand, watching me. His grin was lazy, like he was waiting for a cue in a play only he understood. I tried to ignore him. The sun shimmered off the water. Kids splashed near the shallow end. My father laughed at something one of the neighbors said. It could have been any summer day, except for the tightness in my chest that told me peace was about to snap. Eric wandered over, barefoot and half-drunk. He wiped sweat off his forehead and crouched near my chair. You still mad, sis? I didn't even look up. Mad implies I still care. Ouch, he chuckled. You always think you're above it all, but you're not. You just hide behind your fancy words. I exhaled slowly through my nose. Eric, go away. Instead, he reached out too casually and tapped the edge of my laptop case. This new toy of yours, bet it cost a fortune. My stomach tightened. Don't touch it. He smirked, fingers lingering. Relax, I'm just curious. What's in there? More tragic poetry about your awful family. Something in his tone, it wasn't just teasing. It was ownership. The same kind that had let him rifle through my things once before. I sat up, my voice firmer. Eric, put it down. But instead of setting it back, he picked it up, balanced it in his hands, toyed with the corner like a magician showing off a trick. Stop, I said, standing. He tilted his head. You sure you don't want to share what you're working on? Eric, my throat burned. That's not yours. And then he smiled, a slow, deliberate, cruel smile, 1 heartbeat, 2, then he tossed it. The silver shape arced through the air like a bird shot mid-flight. The splash cut through everything, the laughter, the music, the hiss of the grill. Even the kids stopped moving. For 1 perfect second, no one breathed. Then Eric's voice broke the silence. Oops, he said lightly. Slipped out of my hand. The world around me blurred. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I dove into the pool, the chlorine burning my eyes as I plunged toward the sinking laptop. My fingers closed around it just before it hit the bottom. When I surfaced, hair plastered to my face, lungs burning, I saw them. My parents still sitting, plates balanced on their laps like nothing had happened. Mom's lips tightened. It was an accident, she said quickly. Automatically, an accident. Eric's grin widened. See, Mom gets it. Something inside me cracked open so quietly no one noticed. I climbed out of the water, dripping, clutching the lifeless laptop against my chest. The guests were pretending to look away, but every one of them watched from the corners of their eyes. No one moved to help. Eric grabbed another beer. Don't look at me like that, Jen. You're always so dramatic. Dramatic? My voice came out a whisper. You think this is drama? He raised his bottle in a mock toast. You'll write about it, I'm sure. I stared at him for a long moment, at the smirk, the smugness, the complete absence of remorse. And then, without a word, I turned and walked toward the house, water dripping from my clothes and footsteps echoing on the tile. Behind me, laughter slowly resumed. Music restarted. The party continued like nothing sacred had just drowned. In my room, I set the ruined laptop on a towel. Water dripped from its edges like it was bleeding out. I sat beside it, shaking not from cold, but from the realization that something irreversible had shifted. Whatever thread of family loyalty had survived was now gone, torn, and waterlogged. Down the hall, I heard my mother's voice, soft, apologetic to someone on the phone. She's just sensitive. You know how Jennifer is. Sensitive. That word rolled through me like poison. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just whispered to the silent machine beside me, "You'll live again." Somehow, and in that vow I felt the faintest flicker of something new. Not grief, not rage, power. Maya didn't say anything when she opened the door. She just stared at me, soaked, shaking, clutching my ruined laptop like a newborn, then stepped aside without a word. The warmth of her apartment hit me first. Then the smell, lavender, cinnamon, and a hint of something baking. Maya always made her space feel like a safe place to land. I hadn't realized until that moment how badly I needed one. "I didn't know where else to go," I said as I stepped inside. "You don't need to explain," she replied softly. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and the tears came instantly, rushing up from somewhere deep and untouched, the kind you don't get to schedule or prepare for. I didn't want to cry, not again, but my knees buckled before I even made it to her couch. Maya caught me mid-fall. She didn't ask questions. She didn't push for details. She just pulled me into a full-bodied hug, the kind that wraps around grief and shame like a blanket. "It's okay," she murmured into my hair. "You're safe now. Let it out." And I did. I cried into her shoulder with the kind of ache that made my chest feel hollow. The words tumbled out between sobs like jagged stones. The pool, the splash, the way my parents didn't move, how Eric laughed, how none of them had even tried to help me dry it off. "They just let it happen," I whispered. "Again." Maya led me gently to the couch, sat me down, and knelt in front of me as I cradled the wrapped-up laptop in my arms like a corpse. She looked at it, then at me. "This was your new one, wasn't it?" I nodded. "I bought it with my own savings, every word I'd started rebuilding. Gone." She took the device carefully and placed it on a towel on the coffee table, as if it were something sacred. "I don't get it," I said, voice raw. "Why does he hate me so much?" "He doesn't hate you," Maya said. "He envies you, and envy's nastier than hate because it wants to erase you, not just hurt you." I stared at her. "I know it sounds dramatic," I began. "Jennifer," she cut in gently. "You keep calling your pain dramatic, but nothing you're saying is an overreaction. They've been erasing you one piece at a time. First your words, now your voice. That's not drama, that's abuse." That word. It hung in the air like a spark catching fire. I'd never said it aloud, never even considered it, because abuse felt too big, too real, too final. But now, sitting here in my best friend's apartment, soaked from chlorine and betrayal, I realized something: you don't have to be hit to be harmed. "I feel stupid," I admitted. "I thought moving back home was temporary. I thought I could handle it." "You can handle anything," Maya said. "But handling something and deserving it aren't the same thing." I swallowed hard. Everything's gone. My poems, the journals, my thesis. Even the letters I wrote to myself when I was 19. I used to tell myself I'd read them when I was older, when I needed to remember who I was. Maya reached for my hand. "You still remember, you just haven't had space to hear yourself." I closed my eyes. "I don't even know where to start," I whispered. She squeezed my hand tighter. "We start with tea and a dry t-shirt, and then we rebuild, one file at a time." I let out something between a laugh and a sob. "God, I love you." "Obviously," she said with a grin. "I'm a delight." She stood and walked into the kitchen, calling over her shoulder, "You're not going back there tonight, not even for your toothbrush. You stay here." "Okay, no arguments." "None," I said. "I'm too tired to pretend that place is home anymore." Maya nodded, satisfied. "Good girl." While she boiled water, I changed into one of her oversized t-shirts and curled up on her couch with a blanket that smelled like vanilla. The city hummed outside, and her fairy lights blinked gently above the windows. I watched the laptop on the towel, quiet, still, maybe broken, but not buried. "Hey, Maya," I said softly. "Yeah, if this had happened to you, what would you do?" She didn't even hesitate. "I'd burn every bridge they tried to make me cross alone." I nodded slowly. Something inside me, something old and buried and angry, stirred. They thought they'd silenced me. But in that silence, I was finding something else. Resolve. I woke up on Maya's couch with the morning sun stretching long fingers across the living room floor. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the ruined laptop, still sitting in silence on the towel, and everything came back like a crash. The splash, the smirk, my mother's voice calling it an accident. But I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I sat up, cracked my neck, and whispered to no one, "They don't get another piece of me." Maya emerged from the hallway in her robe, carrying 2 mugs. Figured you'd be up early. I took the coffee she handed me and sipped. Thanks again for everything. She smiled. Anytime, feeling better. Clearer, I said. Angry, but clear. I pulled my phone from under the pillow and tapped into my financial apps. The passwords came to me quickly, like muscle memory. My parents had access to a lot more than they should have. It wasn't malicious at first, just convenient. When I was starting out after grad school, they'd co-signed credit cards just in case. I'd added my mom to one of my health insurance accounts when she was between jobs. Little things, helpful things, until it wasn't. Until they started treating it like an allowance they were entitled to. Like my success meant I owed them something. I tapped through settings, one account at a time. Health insurance removed. Bank co-authorization revoked. Emergency card access terminated. Each step felt like reclaiming a brick of a house I didn't know I still owned. Then came the hard part, the family credit card. It was under my name. I paid it every month, quietly, because I didn't want to deal with the guilt or the fights. But now I saw the charges clearly. Fast food, sports betting apps, 3 monthly streaming services I never used. All Eric. I stared at the Remove Authorized User button for a long time. Maya, watching from the kitchen, said, "Do it." I hesitated. "They're going to freak out." "Let them." So I clicked. One by one, I cut them off, not out of cruelty, but out of survival, because every link to me had become a leash, and I was finally ready to walk free. I whispered as I hit the final authorization, "Let them figure it out." It took exactly 6 hours. At 2:43 p.m., my phone began to buzz. First, it was my mom twice, then my dad, then Eric, then a flood of messages in the family group chat. "Call us. Emergency. Why can't I fill my prescription? Did you cancel the card? This is dangerous, Jennifer. How dare you punish us like this? You're acting unstable." I silenced the phone. 10 minutes later, voicemails poured in. I didn't listen to any of them. I just sat there with Maya, who handed me a plate of toast like I was a recovering patient. "You sure you don't want to check what they're saying?" she asked gently. "Nope. Not even to gloat." I shook my head. "They're not my emergency anymore." By evening, the tone had shifted. The texts went from frantic to bitter, from "we're worried" to "you're ungrateful," from "we need your help" to "after everything we've done for you." That one made me laugh, not out of humor but disbelief. Everything they'd done for me, everything I'd done for them had been quiet, uncelebrated, invisible. I'd covered groceries, bills, bail money. I'd tolerated being talked over, shamed, erased. And they expected more, not this time. Maya sat beside me on the couch, scrolling through the group chat over my shoulder. "They're scrambling," she said. "Good, let them." I nodded slowly. "They'll try to twist this," I said, "make me out to be heartless." "They already do," she replied. "That's how they keep you tethered." The word landed hard. Tethered. Like a balloon always just high enough to float, but never free. Not anymore. I didn't know what would come next. I knew there would be fallout, but something about the silence after cutting them off felt holy, like a breath I'd been holding for years had finally released. I looked over at Maya and she raised her mug to mine. "To freedom," she said. "To consequences," I replied. We clinked. And in that moment I realized, for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. It didn't take long for their silence to become strategy. 3 days after I cut them off, the messages stopped. No more frantic calls, no more guilt-laced voicemails, just nothing. At first, I thought maybe they'd given up, but I should have known better. My family doesn't go quiet unless they're planning something. It started with the voicemail from Susan, my mother, left on a number I hadn't blocked. Her office landline. That alone made me pause. She never used it. Not unless she wanted me to know she was keeping things professional. I played the message on speaker while Maya and I folded laundry together. Her voice was calm, measured, a sharp contrast to the frenzied texts from before. "Jennifer, I know you're hurt, but this has gone far enough. You've punished your family. Eric is under immense pressure and your father had to cancel a medical appointment because of your decisions. We're not the enemy, we're your blood. We need you to come home so we can talk this through." Calmly. "Please don't let stubborn pride ruin what little peace this family has left." I stared at the phone. Maya stopped folding. "Well, that's a masterclass in manipulation." I exhaled. "Right, like I'm the one who broke something." She flipped the whole narrative, Maya said. No mention of your laptop or your writing, just your punishment. I nodded slowly, heart thudding harder than I wanted it to. And that's when the next wave began. Subtle, petty, insidious. Dad sent me a photo of my grandmother's heirloom ring, something she promised me when I turned 30. Just a picture. No caption. Just the velvet box sitting on the kitchen counter. The day after that, Eric posted an Instagram story of him holding one of my framed poems from the hallway, slowly moving it toward the trash can. I only saw it because a mutual friend screenshotted it and sent it to me with the message, is this normal? And then, silence again. It was like they were playing chess with my memories, threatening to discard pieces of me unless I surrendered first. I didn't, but it wore me down. Even knowing what they were doing, it chipped at me. The way they wielded guilt like a blade with no fingerprints. Maya tried to distract me, movie nights, long walks, shared silence, but even she could tell the strain was catching up to me. You know, she said one evening, this isn't just about money or poems. This is about power. They only love you when you're giving them something. I looked at her. And when I stop giving, they punish you for remembering who you are. I swallowed, the lump rising in my throat. They've always made me feel like I'm the one overreacting. Because that's the easiest way to keep you quiet, she said. I nodded. That night, I reread some of my oldest backup files, emails I'd sent to myself, scraps of stories I'd half forgotten I'd written. Even in those early lines, my voice was there, raw, observant, restless. Unmistakably mine. They hadn't silenced me, not completely, but they were trying. And the harder I pulled away, the more they tightened their grip, not with affection but with expectation, with subtle blackmail, with nostalgia used as a weapon. I sat on the floor of Maya's apartment that night, scrolling through old family photos, wondering how many of those smiles had teeth behind them. It was strange. I didn't feel sadness anymore, just clarity. My family wanted a version of me that was generous, silent, and small. But the woman I was becoming, she didn't fit back into their story, not quietly, not ever again. It happened on a Thursday. I was barefoot in Maya's kitchen, stirring honey into a mug of chamomile tea when the knock came, 3 sharp, deliberate raps, not the kind neighbors make, not the kind that waits. Maya looked up from her laptop, already tense. You expecting someone? I shook my head. No. Another knock. Harder this time. Something in my gut twisted. I moved to the door and checked the peephole. It was them, my mother, and Eric. I froze. They stood there like they belonged, like the hallway itself was an extension of their domain. Susan's arms were crossed, perfectly manicured fingers tucked under her sleeves. Eric leaned casually against the wall as if this were some sitcom reunion rather than a calculated ambush. Maya came up behind me. Is that? I nodded. Yeah. She narrowed her eyes. You don't have to open it. I know, I whispered, but I opened it anyway, because if I didn't face them now, I never would. Susan's smile was tight. Jennifer, we've come to talk. Eric didn't smile, he smirked. Nice place, he said, peering inside. Cozy. I didn't invite you, I said, my voice already hardening. We're not here to fight, Susan replied quickly. But you left us no choice. You've been ignoring our messages. You blocked everything. This isn't like you. You don't know me, I said. She blinked, then stepped forward. Honey, you're not thinking clearly. You're emotional, but this has gone too far. Your father's been stressed out of his mind. Eric can't even pay his rent. Not my problem, I said flatly. Eric scoffed. You love playing the victim, don't you? Maya's voice cut through the doorway. She's not playing anything. They both turned to look at her. Susan's eyes narrowed. This is a family matter. And you showed up at my home uninvited, Maya said. That makes it my business. I'm her mother, Susan snapped. And I'm the one making sure she sleeps without fear, Maya shot back. So either you say what you came to say or you leave. Susan's expression cracked. For the first time, she looked unsure. Eric took a step forward. You need to stop this little rebellion, Jen. You're not some martyr. You're just punishing everyone who ever helped you. Helped me? I asked, voice rising now. You mean the time you stole and recycled a decade of my work? Or when you threw my laptop into a pool in front of a crowd? Or maybe when you stood there and laughed while Mom said it was an accident? His jaw clenched. You're being dramatic. There it is, I said. The family motto. Susan sighed, frustrated now. We didn't come here to fight. We came because you're hurting this family, and if you keep this up, you're going to regret it. Is that a threat? Maya asked, stepping closer. I'm stating facts, Susan replied. Just then, another door opened down the hall. Zach, Maya's older brother, stepped into view. He was off duty but still intimidating. Tall, calm, a presence that made people behave. He took one look at the scene and walked over, t-shirt and gym shorts making him look disarmingly casual, but his voice, pure steel. Everything all right here? Eric shifted uncomfortably. Susan straightened. We're just talking to our daughter. Zach looked at me. Is this true? I shook my head. They came without warning. They want me to undo the financial blocks I put in place. Zach turned to them, voice low but clear. This isn't your home, and if you don't leave right now, I'll be forced to document this as harassment. Eric laughed, trying to brush it off. Seriously? Zach didn't blink. You're lucky I'm giving you the option. Susan looked between us, me, Maya, and Zach, and for the first time she seemed to see what she was up against, not just her daughter. But her daughter surrounded by people who actually gave a damn. She reached for her bag. Come on, Eric. Eric muttered something under his breath, but followed her. As they walked down the hall, Susan turned once more. We didn't raise you to be cruel. I stared at her. You raised me to be quiet. I'm just choosing something else now. And then I shut the door. The silence that followed was thick with a strange mix of fear and freedom. Zach raised an eyebrow. Well, that escalated. Maya exhaled slowly, then turned to me. You okay? I didn't answer immediately. I was shaking. Adrenaline buzzed through me, but beneath it, relief. Not because they left, because I finally didn't. I stood my ground. And I wasn't alone. The envelope was thick, too thick for a letter, no return address. Just my name, written in blocky capital letters. The handwriting looked like someone trying too hard to be neat. Maya found it first, tucked between junk mail on her apartment doorstep late one evening. You expecting something? She asked, handing it to me. I wasn't. I tore it open, expecting maybe another threat from my family sent anonymously to get around the phone blocks. But instead, I pulled out something that stopped the air in my lungs. A clear evidence bag. Inside it, damp, water-stained, but unmistakable, was a soft-covered poetry journal. The pink one with torn edges and my initials scratched into the back with a pen from 8th grade. My fingers shook. There was a small note inside the envelope, too. Folded, I unfolded it slowly. Found this at the recycling center. Had your name and number in the back. Looked important. Figured someone should try to get it back to you. Officer Z. Harper. My knees gave out before I could finish reading. I sank onto the couch, holding the bag against my chest. It was like clutching a heartbeat. Maya sat beside me in silence, letting the weight of it settle. That's yours, she whispered. It came back. I nodded, eyes brimming. They didn't get everything, I murmured. And then I started crying, not from grief this time, but from something softer, shock, gratitude. The strange, disorienting relief of something lost finding its way home. The diary was warped from water, pages curled at the edges, ink blurred in places. But when I opened it, most of the writing was still legible. My teenage voice echoed back at me, earnest and sharp. One day I'll write the kind of poems that make even silence feel loud. I laughed through my tears. Looks like you already did, Maya said gently. I leaned into her shoulder. All those pages I thought were shredded, gone without a trace, and yet here was proof that even destruction doesn't mean disappearance. Something had survived. A piece of me had endured the drowning. And maybe, just maybe, I was stronger than they ever knew. You sure it's even worth trying? I asked, staring at the drowned laptop like it might bite me. Maya didn't look up from her desk. If you're asking whether I believe in miracles, I'm a black woman who codes. So yeah, I do. I smiled, just barely. It's been submerged, fried, it's probably dead. Maybe, she said, pulling her hair into a bun with a pencil. But dead doesn't mean forgotten. She pried open the laptop gently, like performing surgery. It creaked. Screen flickered once, then gave nothing. Blank, silent. Okay, she muttered. We're skipping the heart, going for the soul. I tilted my head. You sound like a priest. Tech priest, she replied with a grin. Let's see what the cloud kept. She connected an external device and tapped through lines of code and system logs. My heart thudded in time with every click. Each second stretched. Each moment was a string pulled taut between hope and surrender. Then something beeped. Maya squinted. Bingo. What? I leaned in. She turned the screen toward me. Your auto-sync folder, it backed up everything, every single session you saved when you were on Wi-Fi. I blinked. You mean? She nodded, smiling slowly. I mean your poems aren't gone, your drafts, your notes, even that document named for nobody but me. My hand flew to my mouth. Tears blurred my vision before I could stop them. I thought it was all gone. You didn't give up on it, she said. So it didn't give up on you. I laughed or tried to. It came out as a choked breath. How is this real? Because you never stopped writing, she said softly. Even when no one saw it, even when they tried to silence you. She tapped a few final keys, then backed away like she was unveiling a painting. There, she said. Saved all of it. I stared at the screen. Page after page of words I thought I'd lost, metaphors that bled, poems that whispered, rants disguised as prose. They were messy, raw, incomplete, but they were mine. And they were still here. I reached out and touched the trackpad gently, like greeting an old friend. I didn't know you were this good with tech, I said, eyes still full of wonder. I'm not, she said with a smirk, but I'm really good with revenge arcs. We both laughed then, loud, free, and in that sound I felt something return, something I hadn't known I'd lost myself. The bookstore smelled like paper and warm cinnamon. Indie, local, tucked between a plant shop and a vegan cafe, exactly the kind of place that didn't need to exist, yet somehow always did. The kind of place people walked into looking for one thing and walked out with something they didn't know they needed. That day, they needed me, or more specifically, my words. My first poetry collection, Drowned Voices, Rising, sat in stacks by the register, its cover a soft, stormy blue. People lined up, holding copies in their hands, waiting for signatures. Every few seconds, someone would lean in and whisper, "This poem made me cry," or "This one felt like you knew my life." Some just said thank you and walked away quickly, as if afraid of how much they felt. Maya stood near the back, filming with her phone and occasionally mouthing "breathe" at me like a proud coach at a finish line. I smiled. I breathed. I let the moment in. A woman about my mother's age approached next. Her eyes glistened as she placed her copy in front of me. "This line," she said, flipping to page 32, "they taught me to shrink so I'd fit inside their love. That one nearly broke me." I met her gaze. It nearly broke me too. We shared a nod, a recognition. Then she left. And then came the moment I'd been both waiting for and dreading. A teenage girl approached, freckles across her nose, hoodie too big for her frame. She didn't say a word, just held out her book, her hands slightly shaking. I opened to the front page and wrote slowly, deliberately, "To every silenced soul, you're not erased. You're rewritten stronger." I signed it, dated it. She looked down at the words, blinked quickly, then gave a small, grateful smile before hurrying out of the store. I watched her go and whispered to no one, I was her once. When the event ended, Maya pulled me into a tight hug. "Look what you did," she whispered. "You didn't just survive, you transformed." Outside, the sky was golden with early evening. People held my book like it carried weight, like it mattered. And maybe it did. They never apologized, not really. Susan sent a birthday card, blank inside, no note. Eric posted a vague Instagram story about people who forget blood is thicker. But I didn't respond. I didn't engage because this was my closure, not their regret, not their guilt. My voice rising from the wreckage, printed, shared, heard. So to them, my family who couldn't see me beyond what I gave them, I say nothing. But to you, reading this, listening to my voice, I say this, you don't owe your silence to anyone. You are allowed to be loud, allowed to take up space, allowed to rise, again and again.